Iraq is making preparations to use chemical weapons. Now, they are very clear that they do not see chemical weapons yet moving, but we are told there is, quote, more chatter. The words of officials here in Washington, more chatter in the system. One official reminding us, just think back to the audio tapes that Colin Powell showed at the United Nations that everyone heard of Iraqi commanders talking to each other. Officials again saying if they can find the chemical weapons that they believe are being prepared, they will strike them, but so far they have no direct intelligence as to where these chemical weapons may be. A lot of concern, however, finally, Paula, because we also know there are a number of large artillery pieces that the Iraqis have placed near the Kuwaiti border, artillery that is capable of firing chemical munitions. So officials telling us here in Washington, recent fresh evidence that Iraq is making preparations, in their words, to possibly use chemical weapons. Paula?
You just brought up the issue of artillery pieces. There was a published account that the Iraqis have actually moved a bunch of artillery pieces to the oil fields and along the oil pipelines. Is anybody at the Pentagon confirming that yet this morning?
Well, officials are confirming that there are a number of large artillery pieces in the Al-Fa Peninsula, which is next to the oil fields and along the Kuwaiti border. So far, those artillery pieces have not been struck. They are surface-to-surface artillery pieces. Officials saying the technicalities of the no-fly, no-drive zone don't allow them to strike it, but certainly there is around-the-clock reconnaissance over southern Iraq at this point, watching very carefully to make sure those pieces don't get armed. Paula?
Barbara Starr, thanks for the update. That wraps it up for Jack Cafferty and me. Go off and enjoy the parade.
It'll be an interesting week, isn't it?
Yeah, boy. Put your seatbelts on.
Yeah.
We're going to check in now with Leon Harris and Carol Costello, who are standing by in Atlanta, and you get to watch the same shot we've been watching for the last 3 hours. Dozens of people walking by those two microphones that are set up on a mic stand at the UN. But I know if anybody eventually takes the mics, they will have some very important things to say. Have a good show, you two.
All right, good deal. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. You folks have a good one this morning. Welcome, folks. We're just now hitting 10 a.m. in the east, 7 a.m. in the west. Leon Harris here at the CNN Global Headquarters in Atlanta. I'm
Carol Costello. Darren Kagan is on assignment, and thank you for joining us.
All right, Darren Kagan, by the way, on her way to an assignment in the Persian Gulf. Hopefully we'll be seeing something and hearing from her in just a bit. All this hour, we got quite a bit going on.
The clock appears to be ticking toward a moment of truth at the United Nations. Members of the Security Council are due to meet at any moment for close consultations, though there appears to be little optimism that war in Iraq will be averted. One ominous sign came just hours ago when the U.S. advised inspectors to leave Iraq. At this hour, they do remain on the job and on edge as diplomats a half world away desperately search for common ground. Also live this hour, the latest from the White House. Minutes ago, reporters there gathered for an informal briefing from the administration. CNN White House correspondent Dana Bash will join us in a few minutes with a live update.
But up first this hour here on CNN, the door is closing on United Nations debate this hour, both literally and figuratively. Diplomats are now fighting their way into the Security Council chambers, but there is little optimism there that this closed meeting is going to provide the breakthrough needed to prevent war. CNN senior UN correspondent Richard Roth is at his post. Let's check in with him right now and get the very latest. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning, Leon. We're expecting an update, a critical update on the status of the United States, UK, Spain resolution, which called on Iraq to cooperate by the 17th of March, today, with a full disclosure on weapons of mass destruction. Downstairs in the basement, a new area because of refurbishment going on in the Security Council consultation room. The council is going to meet. They haven't started yet. We've seen Pakistan and Mexico and Guinea, key uncommitted members of the United Nations Security Council on this resolution tussle, file in. They may not feel the pressure anymore after today, because if the U.S. decides to withdraw the resolution, they will not have to announce how they would have voted or would vote. Right now, if we take a look downstairs, there's a high drama here in this basement area waiting for key diplomats. We have yet to see U.S. Ambassador Negroponte or British Ambassador Greenstock. We have seen others file in. If the U.S. was to withdraw its resolution, it would mean they certainly didn't have the votes after weeks of trying. They only had 4 publicly, despite press reports and leaks and other comments. Maybe they got up to 8 within striking distance, as Secretary of State Powell said, but they never cleared the hurdle of getting 9 in favor without any vetoes. France and Russia, to the last moment here, have remained adamant there was no need for another resolution, that Iraq was cooperating enough with the military pressure from the U.S. to not justify a war at this time. Leon.
Well, Richard, the question then becomes, if this resolution is, this proposed resolution actually is withdrawn, is there any other role for the UN from here on out?
The role will be mostly humanitarian after that. The United Nations will, in effect... All right, as you can hear right now from our team of squatters, U.S. Ambassador Negroponte and British Ambassador Greenstock are on their way down to that meeting room. I believe they've just entered the United Nations through the so-called delegates entrance. So in a matter of moments, we will see these two gentlemen. We believe there may be an announcement from them. These have been the two allies. They were allies here in New York. They were allies in the Azores Islands yesterday, along with Spain, in their bid to try to finally come up with a solution diplomatically. Here comes British Ambassador Sir Jeremy Greenstock approaching the microphone. Let's listen. He's flanked by the Spanish ambassador, and there's U.S. Ambassador John Negroponte. And they've got a piece of paper in their hands. Here's their announcement.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd be grateful for quiet for a moment. I would like to make a statement on behalf of the three co-sponsors of the 7 March draft resolution. As you know, we have worked very hard in the last few days in a final effort to seek a Council consensus on Iraq. In an effort to reunite the Council, the United Kingdom proposed last week an ultimatum which would challenge Iraq to take a strategic decision to disarm. There were 3 key elements to the compromise we proposed. First, tough but realizable tests, including an unequivocal commitment to disarmament by Saddam Hussein. Second, a realistic but tight timetable for completion of those tests, given the urgent need for Iraq to comply after 12 years of prevarication. And third, an understanding that if Iraq failed the tests, serious consequences would ensue as set out in Resolution 1441. Having held further discussions with Council members over the weekend and in the last few hours, we have had to conclude that Council consensus will not be possible in line with Resolution 1441. One country in particular has underlined its intention to veto any ultimatum, quote, no matter what the circumstances, unquote. That country rejected our proposed compromise before even the Iraqi government itself, and has put forward suggestions that would row back on the unanimous agreement of the Council in Resolution 1441, and those suggestions would amount to no ultimatum, no pressure, and no disarmament. Given this situation, the co-sponsors have agreed that we will not pursue a vote on the draft UK-US-Spanish resolution in blue. The communiques and press statements that issued at the Azores summit explain the position of our governments on the way forward. The co-sponsors reserve their right to take their own steps to secure the disarmament of Iraq. Thank you.
So how much of a failure is this for British and American diplomacy?
Good morning. We share the statement made by my British colleague. Resolution 1441 was quite clear. In paragraph 4, it established in an unequivocal way that any false statement or omission or the sheer fact of not cooperating fully would constitute a further material breach. We believe that the government of Iraq was given a last opportunity and it has squandered it. Thank you.
Good morning. Hi, can you hear me? I would like to say that we associate ourselves fully with the statement made by Ambassador Greenstock. I would just make the further point that it has been nearly 4.5 months since the Council unanimously adopted Resolution 1441, which found Iraq in material breach and gave it a final opportunity to disarm or face serious consequences. The government of Iraq has clearly failed to comply. Our governments believe that through acts of omission and commission, Iraq is now in further material breach. We advocated a second resolution because a united council would have shown it was intent on enforcing Resolution 1441 and disarming Iraq. We believe that the vote would have been close. We regret that in the face of an explicit threat to veto by a permanent member, the vote counting became a secondary consideration. Thank you. We go on in? We're going back up to the chamber. Okay.
And with that, we've been getting this remarkable news, this historic announcement coming there from the ambassadors of the U.S. and Spain and the U.K. They're arriving at the U.N. for what was supposed to be a behind-closed-doors meeting today to discuss what was going to happen next with this Iraq standoff. But the word we're getting now from the British ambassador there, who announced Jeremy Greenstock moments ago, coming out and saying that the proposal, this proposed resolution that was being offered by the U.S. and co-sponsored by Spain and Britain for a test, a tight timetable, and for an understanding that serious consequences would follow Iraq's non-compliance. That proposal is not going to be voted upon. They're taking that proposal off the table. Now, you also just saw there at the bottom of the screen some other breaking news that we also heard while we were listening to these ambassadors make this announcement. We have also learned, we've been told, CNN has learned from UN officials that UN Secretary General Kofi Annan is going to be telling the inspectors that are right now in Iraq it is time for them to leave. We do not know if he has issued that order yet. Let's go back now to the UN. We understand the French ambassador is speaking.
Even if the consultation didn't start yet, that the co-sponsor of the draft resolution decided not to push this resolution to a vote. They have realized that the majority in the Council is against and oppose a resolution authorizing the use of force. This is the position of the huge majority in the Council. During the last day, members of the Council repeatedly stated that, and it is a majority in the Council, that it would not be legitimate to authorize the use of force now while the inspections set up by resolution are producing results. And now I understand that the co-sponsor made some bilateral consultation, last bilateral consultation last night and this morning. And the result is that the majority of the Council confirmed that they do not want to authorize the use of force. The majority consider that it would not be legitimate, whereas the inspection is producing results, to take such a decision. Thank you very much.
And with that, we heard there the response from the French ambassador de la Sablière coming out and saying that in their consultations that happened here before the behind closed-door meeting was supposed to take place there at the UN, that a majority, in his words, a majority of the Council members have confirmed that, in their view, no use of force in Iraq would be legitimate while the inspections were actually paying dividends and paying off and being productive. And that is the view there from the French ambassador. And that stands in sharp contrast to what we heard earlier just moments ago from the U.S. ambassador, John Negroponte, who says that he believes that if a vote had taken place, it would have been a close vote. However, what we heard here from the French ambassador is that there was a huge majority against the draft resolution. Let's go back down to our Richard Roth, who's standing by there at the UN and has been listening as well. Richard?
Yes, it's a stunning loss for the United States, but they never really wanted this resolution. They were totally happy with the existing one that was approved by everybody.
Richard, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Once again, please hold on, Richard, and audience as well. We're just now being told that President Bush is now going to be coming out and talking to the American public. We believe it's going to happen at 8 p.m. Eastern. That is what we have just now learned from our sources there at the White House. President Bush is saying that he is going to address the nation at 8 p.m. Eastern. Richard, let's go back to you now.
Yes, the U.S. wanted this resolution more for the British government and support international cover, international legitimacy for any military action, though they believe they have the legal basis in Resolution 1441 passed November 8th by all 15 members. It will not be known now whether those uncommitted, who will probably drift from the limelight now, Cameroon, Guinea, Pakistan, Mexico, Chile, exactly how they would have voted. They were desperately trying to come up with other diplomatic solutions, but they died over the weekend and even Friday as prospects dimmed for this resolution, and the U.S., U.K., and Spain huddled in the Azores Islands. Kofi Annan is going to tell the Security Council now that he is going to withdraw the inspectors, and he presumably will get the blessing of the United Nations Security Council because the inspectors report to the full council. We talked earlier about how council refurbishment and handiwork had forced all the ambassadors down in the basement. That's why you saw Ambassadors Negroponte and Greenstock speaking there. Now they're moving up to the full council chamber, which you now see because the room was too small in the basement. This was high-powered politics. France sticking to its veto threat, sticking to the end. Many thought France would crumble, crack, as some say in the past. They stayed to it, and thus Russia was emboldened to also join in possible veto threats. China would have maybe joined in or maybe abstained. Now the United Nations diplomatic path is over, and here there is a feeling that it's just a matter of time before it's a military approach with Iraq. Leon.
Thank you very much, Richard. Richard Roth at the UN this morning as developments there are seeming to come fast and furious.
Oh, you're not kidding, Leon. So there will be no vote on the second UN resolution, and the president will speak to the nation at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Let's head to Washington, D.C. now to our White House correspondent, Dana Bash. Dana, what will the president say?
Well, we were just told by Ari Fleischer, the White House spokesman, that the president, as you said, will speak at 8 o'clock Eastern tonight. He will address the nation, and what he will say, Ari Fleischer said, is that to avoid military conflict, Saddam Hussein must leave the country. That is what Ari Fleischer says the president will say at 8 o'clock tonight in an address to the nation. Ari Fleischer also saying that the diplomatic window is now closed. He said the UN has failed to meet its own demands, and as a result, the diplomatic window is now closed. And so that is what the president will say tonight. And as you said, it is clear that the resolution has been withdrawn from the UN, and things are moving quite quickly.
Dana, that diplomacy has apparently failed. Does the president look upon this as a failure?
Well, it depends how you look at it. If you're talking about failure at the United Nations, I think the president made it very clear his frustration with the United Nations when he spoke yesterday in the Azores. He was making it very clear that the UN, he felt and still feels, had the responsibility to live up to what he says, as Ari Fleischer said again today, is their own demands, and that demand is for Saddam Hussein to disarm or face serious consequences. Those were the terms of the resolution that passed in November. That was Resolution 1441 that passed unanimously. What you've seen at the White House is an attempt by President Bush and his chief ally Tony Blair and others to try to get the UN to pass a second resolution because they felt that that was what some of the president's allies, particularly Tony Blair, needed at the UN. But that has not happened. The White House has failed to get other countries on board at the United Nations, and the president has been saying for a while that the diplomacy has weeks, not months. Now, clearly that diplomatic window, as Ari Fleischer said earlier, just moments ago, point blank, that diplomatic window has now closed.
Completely. Dana Bash, thanks very much. So again, the president will address the nation at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Ari Fleischer will also present a White House briefing. We will carry that live too. That will happen at 12:15 p.m. Eastern time. That's this afternoon. Well, diplomacy is over. Activity in Baghdad is quickening. Iraqis are scooping up provisions as they face the prospect of hunkering down for war. We want to take you to the Iraqi capital now for the view from Baghdad. CNN senior international correspondent Nick Robertson is there. Has Saddam come out and said anything, Nick?
Carol, not at this time. We've seen President Saddam Hussein appearing on Iraqi television this afternoon with the Tunisian foreign minister, and perhaps for the Iraqi viewers a chance to hear something from their leader that they haven't heard before about the weapons of mass destruction. He did say that Iraq has no weapons of mass destruction, something we've heard many, many times before. What people haven't really heard here, and what President Saddam Hussein was telling the Tunisian foreign minister, was that Iraq had these weapons of mass destruction in the past for defensive use. He said Iraq had fought a long war, an 8-year war with Iran, and it had needed to have chemical and biological weapons of mass destruction at that time. Now this is, as far as we can tell, this sort of description about why Iraq has had weapons of mass destruction in the past has not been heard from the Iraqi leader, at least for a very long time. We also hear from the UN weapons inspectors here, while they're certainly aware that it very much appears at this time that there's going to be a formal request arriving here requesting them to leave. They say they have not heard that request yet. They are waiting for UN Weapons Chief Hans Blix to formally pass that information to them. There are 56 weapons inspectors in the country at this time. The UN here says that it has 134 staff total in the inspection mission, and that their primary plan at this time would be to fly out of Iraq if and when they get that evacuation order. They do have the option of driving to the Jordanian border. That would take somewhat longer, but their plan at this time, as we understand, is to evacuate by aircraft to Cyprus. We have heard today from Iraq's Information Minister Mohammed al-Sahaf talking about the Azores summit, essentially calling it a failure.
I think it's a failure. Those despicable 3 failures, they tried again to divert the attention, and all they presented is a series of lies and a series of dark black propaganda like Mr. Bush and the others.
Now al-Sahaf also saying Iraq continues to cooperate with the weapons inspectors. However, with the weapons inspectors clearly on the brink of leaving, that appears to be all over, Carol.
Nick, let's go back to Saddam Hussein admitting that he once had weapons of mass destruction. What is the significance of that?
Well, the significance is that this is really an explanation for the people of Iraq at a time when President Saddam Hussein is looking to keep the people of Iraq behind him, to give them, if you will, some sort of credible explanation for why Iraq has had weapons of mass destruction in the past. It's one thing here for people to hear the leadership saying the country has no weapons of mass destruction, while many in the international community say Iraq does. It's one thing for them to hear that from the Iraqi leader, but now getting some sort of explanation about it, the timing obviously very, very critical. This is a time for the country here, for President Saddam Hussein, to look to his people to give him support. Now we know from officials here, they say in the referendum last year, people voted 100% in support of President Saddam Hussein. But at this time, the leadership really needs to know and really needs to make sure that it does, at this very critical time, have that support in a credible fashion. Carol.
It just seems to be a little late for that, but we'll see what happens. Nick Robertson reporting live from Baghdad today. Leon?
Now we have some news coming to us out of the State Department in Washington. We've just received word that Secretary of State Colin Powell is going to be having a press conference this morning. We expect it to get underway in about 20-25 minutes or so. We think it's going to be around 10:45 Eastern, and of course, live coverage right here on the network as Secretary of State Colin Powell comes out to talk to us after this word coming from the UN that the draft resolution offered by the U.S., Spain, and Britain is now being taken off the table. Now, earlier today, both the U.S. and the British governments urged their citizens to leave Kuwait immediately. The State Department cites, quote, a deteriorating security situation in the region, end quote. The U.S. State Department issued similar orders for non-essential consular personnel and dependents, not only in Kuwait, but elsewhere in the Middle East. The evacuation orders include Syria, Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank. And the consequences of staying in that region may be getting more and more serious, because we've got some breaking news coming to us now from the Pentagon. Officials are saying that Iraq may be preparing to use chemical weapons if war breaks out. Let's go to Barbara Starr, who's standing by at the Pentagon. She brought us this news just recently. Let's go to her for the latest. Barbara.
Leon, what U.S. officials here in Washington are saying is that in the last few days, there is recent and fresh evidence that Iraq is preparing to use chemical weapons. Now, they are very clear. No one has actually seen chemical weapons move. No one has seen the physical evidence of chemical weapons yet, but officials say there is, in their words, more chatter in the system, reminding us that of the time that Secretary of State Colin Powell played some audio tapes at the UN just a few weeks ago of Iraqi commanders talking to each other. Officials say, think of the evidence in those terms. Now, U.S. reconnaissance is watching Iraq virtually around the clock at this point, looking for any evidence of that type of activities, and officials are saying if they can find the chemical weapons and they see them on the move, indeed those munitions will be struck. One of the biggest concerns is that in the last several days as well, there are several large pieces of Iraqi artillery that have been moved close to the Kuwaiti border and along the Al-Fa Peninsula. These artillery pieces are said to be capable of firing chemical munitions, and many of those artillery pieces now are within range of U.S. troops in Kuwait. But again, officials saying at this point it is chatter in the system. They haven't seen the munitions yet. Leon?
Some very troubling news there. Thanks, Barbara. Stay on top of that for us. We'll get back to you on the very latest. Thank you, Barbara. Barbara Starr at the Pentagon.
We want to take it back to the United Nations. The Pakistani ambassador speaking right now. Let's listen to what he has to say.
Diplomacy, it seems pretty clear the diplomatic window has closed.
Well, I think that the diplomatic window is never closed, not even in the worst of times. So let's hope that there is still space.
Do you blame the French for scuppering this like the Americans do?
We blame nobody.
Mr. Ambassador, the French ambassador said this morning that he got confirmed that the majority would have voted no for this American resolution. On which side would Pakistan would have been?
I do not enter into conjecture.
Oh, come on. I mean, this morning you did say that diplomacy and politics should go on. I mean, sure. So it was no time for war or what?
Pakistan had always said that we would decide our position when the time came to vote. The time did not come to vote.
Are you happy about that?
I think you should ask the other 14 as well.
Pakistani Ambassador Munin Akram dodging some questions there from reporters who are eager for any answers that the ambassadors at the United Nations must have. We have to tell you, 10:45 Eastern Time, Colin Powell is set for a press conference. We're going to carry that live.
And, of course, the biggest news of all that we've heard so far this morning, President Bush has announced that he is going to be addressing the nation 8 p.m. Eastern tonight, and we've gotten a bit of a heads up on what we expect to hear him say. President Bush will be telling the country tonight that Saddam Hussein has only a matter of a few days to leave the country. Stay tuned. Much more on all this coming up after a break.
I don't know what to do, Doc. I keep losing home loans to Ditech.com.
I see.
Customers apply online or by phone 24/7. They never come to the bank anymore. Even my mom got a loan from Ditech.
Very interesting. Need cash to pay off bills? Get a second mortgage with a no closing cost option from Ditech.com.
So what do you think, Doc?
I think you just lost another loan to Ditech. Ditech.com. 1-800-71-FIXED.
That's me with his whole family. So you on a farm? Yeah. Imagine with my allergies. Go where you wanna go. Do what you want.
This is Trisha. Now there's a new and different way to treat seasonal allergies. Singulair, the only seasonal allergy medicine that specifically blocks leukotrienes, an underlying cause of allergy symptoms. It's a once-a-day tablet that helps relieve a broad range of symptoms for a full 24 hours.
Yeah.
Side effects are generally mild and vary by age and may include headache, ear infection, sore throat, and upper respiratory infection. Ask your doctor about Singulair.
Morning.
Good morning.
Ready to go for a tractor ride?
You know, I think I did just fine.
Singulair, a different way to treat seasonal allergies.
She was in the hospital screaming that she did not want them to hurt her again.
I have type 1 diabetes.
It was heart-wrenching to hear a 3-year-old cry from having her finger poked with the Freestyle. She's not afraid to have her sugar checked.
And it doesn't hurt.
The machine itself is so easy to use that it's been a blessing. We can do all the things that normal people do, and Hannah can be a normal kid.
Freestyle. It will change the way you feel about testing.
The events surrounding the showdown with Iraq now gathering up now to critical speed. Just within the past 10-15 minutes or so this morning, we've seen a flurry of activity at the United Nations in New York. We heard there this morning the announcement that the draft resolution being offered by the U.S., Britain, and Spain has now been pulled off the table, meaning, therefore, that all deliberations diplomatically at the UN regarding holding off a war on Iraq have now been taken off the table. Also, we have also learned that Secretary of State Colin Powell is going to be coming out of the State Department. He is going to be having a press conference and offering us his view. We expect that to happen within about 15 minutes or so. Live coverage of that right here on the network. Also, and perhaps even more importantly this morning, we have also learned from the White House that President Bush is going to be coming out and addressing the nation. You see here a live picture from the UN. We've been seeing a stream of UN ambassadors coming out by those microphones and offering their perspectives this morning. Many of them still saying they're holding out hope for diplomacy. We're going to keep our eye tuned to that particular location, and once anyone else comes out of any import, we'll go there and get their words. Now, getting back to President Bush, we understand that he is going to be speaking to the nation tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern, and we understand that he is going to be saying that Saddam Hussein has only a number of days to leave that country. Now, joining us now this morning to talk about all these developments, as well as this perhaps this proposed speech from President Bush this evening, is Joe Wilson. He is a former U.S. envoy to Iraq, and he was there at the time of the 1991 Gulf War. He joins us this morning from Washington. Good to see you again, Ambassador Wilson. I have quite a bit to talk about this morning. First of all, let's begin with this announcement about the draft resolution being taken off the table. Are you surprised by that? What does this mean to you?
Not at all. The United States didn't want this draft resolution from the very beginning. They supported it only because Tony Blair needed it for some political cover in the UK. When the president came out last week and provided Tony Blair the other fig leaf, which is a commitment to the Middle East peace process, that was done clearly because the resolution was dead in the water. What I am surprised about is playing the blame game. It's the fact that there were a number of countries that opposed it is just one of those facts of life. There's no particular need to go out and start blaming anybody for standing in the way of this juggernaut.
Well, we've heard heavy blame being laid at the feet of France on this one. You're surprised by that?
Well, I find it really unnecessary, undignified, particularly by the Americans, in view of the fact that the president made it very clear he didn't feel any particular need to go back to the United Nations in the beginning. Obviously, he didn't feel the need because it wasn't clear that he'd get a second resolution. So his thinking on that was verified.
Well, you were saying here that this is, and this has been the view by many, that this whole idea of the second resolution was to offer cover for Tony Blair.
Absolutely.
With there being no vote, what actually was accomplished then?
Well, I think that by there being no vote, legally the United States and its allies in this war will be able to revert to 1441 and a serious consequences phrase as justification for taking the military action they're about to take. Had they gone for another vote and it had been voted down, then it would have called into question the legality of this war operation.
All right. Well, speaking of operations, one operation that perhaps is underway even as we speak now is the evacuation of all U.S. personnel and those who are called non-essential personnel who may be within that region, either in Kuwait or any other country in the region. Can you explain to us what that process is all about?
Sure. When we did the Gulf War, we evacuated non-essential personnel from everywhere from Tanzania to Mauritania. It's basically getting dependents, the wives and children of American diplomats, as well as diplomats who were not essential to the day-to-day functioning of a smaller, reduced-size embassy in a wartime situation, trying to get people to safety, essentially.
Now, as we heard just moments ago, we did hear the word that something of a tip-off as to what President Bush may come out and talk about this evening, is that he may be coming out and saying that Saddam Hussein has only a matter of days to leave the country, a matter of days in order to avert war. I'm assuming that you don't believe that's in any way likely.
Oh, I don't think that we're going to avert war, and I think a matter of days is probably right. If you look at the shock and awe strategy of somewhere between 48 and 72-hour bombing, and you back it up a little bit, we could be at war as early as, say, Wednesday. My guess is that they will not want to bomb Baghdad heavily on the Friday holy day, but maybe they will.
Well, we haven't been able to predict almost anything in this whole entire process, so who knows about that?
Actually, Paula suggested the other day that I predicted almost everything.
Oh, is that right? In that case, then you're coming back for sure. Ambassador Joe Wilson, always good to have you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Leon.
Carol.
Bye-bye.
All right, Leon. A reminder again, in just about 15 minutes, Defense Secretary Colin Powell will hold a press conference. We're going to be carrying that for you live. We're also monitoring the United Nations to see if any more ambassadors want to come out and give their perceptions of what happened today. Of course, that second UN resolution will not be voted on. The diplomatic window now closed. In fact, President Bush will speak to the nation at 8 p.m. Eastern Time to tell Saddam Hussein he has just a few days to leave his country. We'll be back right after this break. You stick around.
HP Technology and HP people help BMW Williams run every race before the driver ever gets in the car.
Danielle, can you find another place for your backpack?
Unlimited online bill paying. Free from Bank of America.
Right there.
Higher standards.
The persistence of 135 years of experience. The performance that has enabled us to work with more than half the Fortune 500. The strength of one of the largest financial services companies in America. Strength of Pacific Life.
You know, we're never in the same place at the same time. No, not really. So we need a plan that allows us to talk, you know, as much as we want, all the time, whenever we want. And then no extra charge.
With Singular's Family Talk plan, call each other for free with unlimited mobile-to-mobile calling. Get 5,000 night and weekend minutes to share, up to 3 additional lines, and up to 4 free phones.
We call it the Conley Brothers. What's up? What's up? What's up plan?
Come in and find out how Singular fits you best.
Moving freely makes my spirits soar.
Discover new Flexium, a unique supplement for joint health.
I feel wonderfully carefree with less stiffness.
Flexium works in 2 ways. Only Flexium combines a patented form of SAMe to help ease pain from everyday activities, plus glucosamine to help renew cartilage. You can feel results in as little as 2 weeks. Feel the Flexium difference in your joints. Guaranteed.
If you are just joining us, it's 10:35 Eastern Time, and a lot is happening this morning. For example, that second UN resolution, in the United Nations will not be voted on. It has been withdrawn. Also, Kofi Annan will order weapons inspectors out of Iraq, and President Bush will be speaking to the nation live at 8 o'clock Eastern Time tonight. CNN's coverage will begin at 7 p.m. Eastern. We hope you join us then. Now on to this. Kurds living in northern Iraq find themselves especially vulnerable as the talk of war increases, and the threat is from within their own country in the form of Iraqi troops. So many Kurds are literally heading for the hills, especially now. CNN's Jane Arraf is in northern Iraq and joins us via video phone.
The diplomatic standoff has sparked an exodus from this city. Now, police here have been waving through tens of thousands of people, all of them hoping to outrun what they feel is imminent war. Now, there are trucks, buses, motorcycles even, all packed to the rafters with belongings, practically everything people can carry away. Children packed into taxi cabs. Some of the cars are carrying cradles on top. All of these people are fleeing east, further into Kurdish-controlled territory. And they say it's because they feel that the diplomatic process has broken down and war is coming. And if war comes, they say, there's a threat of a chemical attack. Now, a lot of the children that we've been seeing here are laughing and waving. They see it as a big adventure, but the parents are worried. They have very distinct memories of chemical attacks on the Kurds by Iraqi forces in previous years. None close to here, but still the fear is great enough to send them fleeing in the tens of thousands. And it's expected to continue into the night. Carol?
Jane Arraf reporting live via video phone this morning. The Kurds in northern Iraq afraid and they have reason to be afraid, especially now since diplomatic efforts have broken down completely.
Exactly. We're going to continue to watch that as that develops. As a matter of fact, any moment now, we expect Secretary of State Colin Powell is going to be having a press conference at the State Department in Washington. Very interested here we are to hear what he has to say this morning, so stay with us. We'll have coverage of that for you.
Something else very interesting, Leon, before we head to break, let's take a look at the big board because stocks are going wild.
That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. You see the Dow Industrials are up.
Oh, my goodness.
Triple digits they're up, and this is perhaps in the last 2 or 3 minutes or so, they've gone up maybe 25, 30 points. I'm also seeing the NASDAQ is up as well. Markets perhaps reacting because the air of uncertainty may have been removed this morning.
That's right, because certainly a lot has been happening and the market is reacting to that. We'll have much more on the business front and more after this.
Business Update is brought to you by Sprint. Introducing PCS Vision. Clearly a whole new way to look at wireless.
What happened? I ordered 200 dachshund, but they sent us all these little wiener dogs. 200 dachshund.
Were you on a cell phone, sir?
Well, yeah.
Static. Here. Now you can get clear calls and do more, because Sprint built the largest all-digital, all-PCS enhanced nationwide network from the ground up. For clarity you can see and hear.
Thanks. Now this would have helped.
Get unlimited PCS Vision 500 anytime and unlimited night and weekend minutes from Sprint.
You need to manage your business anytime, anywhere. Gateway's new business notebooks featuring Intel Centrino mobile technology help you stay productive with wireless connectivity. Plus the freedom of having up to 8 hours of battery life. Now get 0% business financing for 24 months when you purchase Gateway 450 E-Series business notebooks. Gateway, business, government, education. Gateway 450 notebooks feature Intel Centrino mobile technology.
What can a pitching machine teach us about financial advisors? Working with one can leave you better prepared. At Wachovia Securities, we learn from the world around us and provide financial advice for whatever comes your way. Together, we can achieve uncommon results. Wachovia Securities.
What is the Subaru all-wheel drive away? It's financing as low as 0% on the all-wheel drive Outback, 0% on the all-wheel drive WRX, 0% on the all-wheel drive Legacy, and 0% on the all-wheel drive Forester. Every Subaru is built with all-wheel drive, and every Subaru is at an all-time low through March 31st. So head to the Subaru all-wheel drive away for incredible deals on every Subaru today.
Welcome back as we continue our coverage this morning of the apparent closing of the window of diplomacy and the resolution on the standoff with Iraq. Word coming from the UN this morning that the U.S. draft resolution that was co-sponsored by Spain and Britain has been pulled off the table, and a vote will not be held on that resolution this morning. Lots of questions about whether or not there would even be a chance that that resolution would pass. That is not even going to be an issue now, as that resolution has been pulled. Now, we understand that U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell will be coming out within about the next 5 minutes or so to this podium here at the State Department in Washington. We'll be getting his words on the latest developments, so stay with us. We'll have live coverage of that right here. Now, in the meantime, there appears to be a growing sense of public support in the U.S. for an American-led invasion of Iraq, and at least that's the feeling being expressed now in the latest CNN USA Today Gallup poll, which was released over the weekend, and our Bill Schneider is joining us now with the details and the analysis on that poll. Morning, Bill. Lots to talk about there, no doubt.
Yes, there is. We've seen a lot of pictures of rallies, but the fact is Americans are rallying behind President Bush. Just since the beginning of March, the number of Americans who favor an invasion of Iraq with U.S. ground troops has jumped from 59 to 64%. That 64 is the highest level of public support since just after the 9/11 attacks a year and a half ago. In other words, the public is saying, let's roll.
Now, those numbers, though, Bill, have been affected one way or another by the question about whether or not the UN actually outrightly sanctions any movement of U.S. troops into the region. What do the numbers tell you about that now?
What they tell us, Leon, is that the idea of not putting this to a vote at all is the least favorite option of the American people. Obviously, if the UN supported a new resolution, overwhelmingly Americans would favor going in, and they'd also, by majority, favor going in, 54%, if the resolution were put to a vote and it was rejected by the UN. But Americans are split over the idea of going in if there's no UN vote at all. To the public, a UN vote means we tried. No UN vote means we gave up. Now, there is a problem with asking for a resolution and going in even if it's rejected. That would violate the UN Charter, and it would be illegal under international law. Suppose we do what we seem to be planning to do, go to war without asking for a UN vote. Has that ever happened? Sure. It happens all the time. There was no UN vote to authorize the Vietnam War, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, the British war in the Falklands, and most recently, the NATO war in Kosovo. I think the rule is it's much better to ignore the UN, which we apparently have chosen to do, than it would be to defy the UN.
Very interesting. I'd be curious to see exactly what the poll numbers look like next time around now that that has happened. So what do the numbers say about the U.S. public support of the UN? I've got to think that based upon those numbers that U.S. can't be having very much confidence right now in the UN.
Not at all. In fact, U.S. support, American public support for the UN has taken a big hit. As recently as January, Americans thought the UN was doing a good job, 50 to 42%. But look at people's view of the UN now, 58% negative. Gallup has been asking this question since 1953. This is the worst rating, the worst, that the UN has gotten in 50 years. And Leon, before we jump to the conclusion that it's Republicans and angry radio talk show hosts dumping on the UN, I have some news. The UN took its biggest hit among Democrats. The number of Democrats who think the UN is doing a lousy job jumped by 30 points since January.
Now, that is very interesting. Does that say anything at all about the way that the administration has actually been making the case, and that they've actually made it successfully, even with perhaps those that may have been the most skeptical of the administration?
That's right. This is a partisan issue, but it's not quite Democrats on one side, Republicans on the other. Republicans almost unanimously support the option of an invasion. Democrats are actually split, which means they don't speak with one voice.
Now, speaking of the case that the administration has been making, it's been criticized that the administration has been trying to go too much and stretch out too far, perhaps, in trying to in making the case against the war on terror, and saying that there's been some connections between Saddam Hussein and what happened here in 9/11. What do the numbers say about that?
Well, let's listen to what the president said. He said at his news conference on March 6th, September the 11th should say to the American people that we're now a battlefield, that weapons of mass destruction in the hands of terrorists could be deployed here at home. In other words, the president's argument for war is if Saddam Hussein is not disarmed, he will launch another 9/11. That's why Americans now support something they've never supported or even contemplated in the past, which is a preemptive war. Now, 88% of Americans agree with the president and believe Saddam Hussein supports terrorist groups that have plans to attack the United States. That's the principal reason why Americans support an invasion. But in fact, 51% believe Saddam Hussein was himself personally involved in 9/11. Well, Leon, I think the bottom line is, for Americans, this war is all about 9/11.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because there's no shortage of voices who are saying there is no connection, or there has been no proven connection between Saddam Hussein and September 11th, and yet the public still believes that.
That's right. The administration has made 2 points. There are ties between Saddam Hussein and al-Qaeda, some al-Qaeda presence in Iraq, and the argument that I just quoted, the president says if we don't disarm him, there'll be another September 11th. But no clear evidence that he was personally tied to September 11th. Nevertheless, Americans believe it. They probably believe it because Saddam Hussein and al-Qaeda share the same goal. They want to see, both of them want to see Americans dead.
Bill Schneider, thank you very much. Appreciate that, as always. Bill Schneider in Washington. Carol.
What can you say, Leon? The news has been fluid this morning. It certainly has. Things are changing. We told you about that White House briefing by Ari Fleischer at 12:15 Eastern Time. Well, he has now canceled that event. And maybe we should have expected that, since the president is to speak to the nation at 8 o'clock Eastern Time tonight. Also, we've learned the president will be meeting with congressional leaders at 5:45 Eastern Time this afternoon. Of course, we'll keep you updated on all of these fast-breaking developments today. We're going to take a break. We have so much more to tell you about, so stay right there.
That was great, Mom. I saw 5 snakes. I got a picture.
Where you wanna go, do what you wanna do.
Now
Now there's a new and different way to treat seasonal allergies. Singulair, the only seasonal allergy medicine that specifically blocks leukotrienes, an underlying cause of allergy symptoms. It's a once-a-day chewable tablet that helps relieve a broad range of symptoms for a full 24 hours. It's available for children as young as 2. Side effects are generally mild and vary by age and may include headache, ear infection, sore throat, and upper respiratory infection. Ask your child's doctor about Singulair. Singulair, a different way to treat seasonal allergies.
Swimming, we went canoeing, we did all kinds of fun stuff.
And out of the State Department and Secretary of State Colin Powell.
Unanimity, the Security Council came together following President Bush's historic speech to the United Nations on the 12th of September, and on the 8th of November, after long negotiations, passed UN Resolution 1441 by unanimous vote, 15-0, not one member failing to raise a hand in support of that resolution. In the months after the passage of UN Resolution 1441, we watched as the inspectors began their work, and we were immediately concerned that Iraq was not going to understand the intention of 1441 when Iraq submitted 30 days later a declaration that can only be said to be false, not complete, rather incomplete, not truthful, untruthful, and nowhere near meeting the spirit intended in 1441. We called that out to the international community at that time. We said we believe that that false declaration was a material breach. We continued to support the inspectors, we continued to watch, and although we have seen some process improvements and some grudging movement on the part of Saddam Hussein's regime to provide some information and provide some equipment to the inspectors, it certainly wasn't the kind of compliance and total cooperation that 1441 required, and that we were hoping, but had no illusions, about Iraq being able to accept and respond to. As a result of this, and as a result of a number of briefings that we received from UNMOVIC and IAEA, a week and a half ago, the United Kingdom, the United States, and Spain put forward a resolution that would once again give Saddam Hussein one last chance to act or face the serious consequences that were authorized and clearly intended in UN Resolution 1441. Unfortunately, over the last roughly 2 weeks or thereabouts, a little less than 2 weeks, that we have debating this particular draft resolution, and despite best efforts to see whether or not language could be adjusted to make it more acceptable to council members, it is clear that there are some permanent members of the council that would veto any such resolution or any resolution resembling the one that the British tabled Friday before last at the United Nations. As a result of this, the United Kingdom, the United States, and Spain decided to not call for a vote on this resolution. We spent a great deal of time overnight and early this morning talking to friends and colleagues around the world about the resolution, and it was our judgment reached by the United States, the United Kingdom, and Spain that no further purpose would be served by pushing this resolution. So we are not going to ask for a vote on the resolution. The resolution will die anyway because it had a built-in date of 17 March within the resolution, which has not been modified. As you heard the President and the other leaders who assembled in the Azores yesterday for the Atlantic Summit say, the window on diplomacy is closing. The moment of truth is arriving. And you will hear a speech from the President of the United States this evening. President Bush will address the nation and the world on the situation as we now see it. In his speech, he clearly will issue an ultimatum to Saddam Hussein that the only way to avoid the serious consequences that were built into 1441 is for Saddam Hussein and his immediate cohort to leave the country and to allow this matter to be resolved through the peaceful entry of force and not a conflict. Nevertheless, the President's determination will be made clear tonight that this matter cannot continue indefinitely, that Saddam Hussein is guilty of the charges that had been brought against him previously through these many resolutions which acknowledged that he had weapons of mass destruction, and he has failed to disarm himself as required by the various resolutions. We believe, and I think you've also heard an opinion from British legal authorities within the last 24 hours, that there is a sufficient authority in 1441, 678, and 687 earlier resolutions for whatever military action might be required. I'm very, very pleased that the Council did come together last November 8th for 1441. Of course, disappointed that we were unable to get a subsequent resolution, but we believe that our actions now are supported by international law, whatever actions we might take in the future, and the President will talk to this issue tonight. I won't say any more about the President's speech because the President, of course, will have the opportunity to speak for himself and make the points perfectly clear to the American people and to the international community. You'll also notice that in their statements yesterday at the Atlantic Summit, all of the leaders spoke to a future for Iraq that will be brighter if it comes to the use of military force, where this dictator will no longer be able to oppress his own people, no longer able to threaten his neighbors, and no longer able to develop these horrible weapons which could be used against his neighbors as they have been used in the past, or of greater concern to us, can spread and be acquired by terrorist organizations which might use them against us, our friends, or our interests. I think it was also important to note in the President's statement yesterday his commitment to the UN and the role that we believe the UN will play in the aftermath of any conflict should it come, and our continued support for the UN. With that, I'll take a couple of questions and I have to go.
On the Allies,
yeah.
Back in November, when several of them tried to dilute the resolution, and they did accomplish some word changes, would it be fair to say that they understood at the end that force was possible, because they seemed to give the impression they had succeeded in sidetracking force? And could you say if you think there'll be permanent damage to the alliance with what the French have done with support from Germany and Russia?
On your first question, Barry, there can be no confusion on this point. If you remember the debate that we were having before 1441 was passed, there were some nations who insisted that a second resolution would be required. And we insisted that a second resolution would not be required. And as we negotiated our way through that, we made it absolutely clear that we did not believe that the resolution as it finally passed would require a second resolution. And in fact, the resolution that we are not taking to a vote today is not a resolution that we believed was necessary. It was a resolution we were supporting along with the United Kingdom, who tabled it, and Spain. It was a resolution that would help some of our friends to show to their publics and to the world that we had taken one last step. We had made one last effort to see if Saddam Hussein would come into compliance. The burden of this problem rests squarely on Saddam Hussein and his continuing efforts to deceive, to deny, to do everything to divide the Council, to take advantage of every meeting we have had over the last several months, to do something just before that meeting to suggest that he is complying when he really isn't. And the world should know that this crisis is before us because of this regime and its flagrant violation of obligations that it entered into over the last 12 years. That's where the burden lies.
And is there permanent damage
is there permanent damage to the alliance? The UN is an important institution, and it will survive, and the United States will continue to be an important member of the United Nations and its various organizations. But clearly, this is a test, in my judgment, that the Security Council did not meet. We all knew what we were doing last fall. The very reason that we went into a prolonged negotiation on 1441 was so that it did not become the same kind of resolution that we had seen so many times in the past, that had a lot of words, a lot of rhetoric, and Saddam Hussein can simply ignore and thumb his nose at. This was a resolution that every person who voted for it, every permanent representative who was there on the 8th of November and voted for this resolution, knew that it was different, that serious consequences would flow, and those serious consequences meant the use of force to disarm Saddam Hussein if he did not comply with that resolution and cooperate fully with the inspectors to disarm that regime.
Mr. Secretary, how long a period of time do you think is appropriate for Saddam Hussein to be allowed to get out, and who else besides him would have to leave if they want to avert war?
I won't speak to a time limit. The President may do that in the speech this evening, and I'll leave that to him. But clearly, we would want to see Saddam Hussein depart, as well as immediate members of his family who are in positions of control and authority over the armed forces of Iraq. And there are a number of other individuals who would also like to see depart. Some of them were mentioned in the weekend press. But it's not just one individual, I think, to solve the problem.
Do you have a number, though? Is there
I don't have a number at hand. There are a variety of numbers and ideas floating around, and if somebody in Baghdad wishes to know the names, I'm sure we'd be able to provide them.
Mr. Secretary, can you give us some insight what has happened over the last 24 hours since the meeting in the Azores? Who were the problems? What kind of conversations did you have? Who did you reach out to? And what were the responses?
The United Kingdom obviously reached out to a number of their colleagues, and I can't speak for them. I'll let them cover their own calls and consultations. Similarly, Spain and others. Richard will give you the list of my calls for this morning, but it's about 12 or 15. I've spoken to the French, just spoke to Foreign Minister de Villepin. I spoke to Foreign Minister Joschka Fischer of Germany. I've spoken to Foreign Minister Igor Ivanov of the Russian Federation. I've spoken to the new Chinese Foreign Minister, Foreign Minister Li. I've spoken to President Musharraf. I have spoken to Kofi Annan. I have spoken to Foreign Minister George Papandreou of Greece, who's also in the Greek presidency for this period. I've spoken to Foreign Secretary Straw. I've spoken to Foreign Minister Palacios of Spain. And there's a very long list waiting when I get back upstairs. The response was, you know, this is where we are. Does anybody see any prospects for movement on this particular resolution? And frankly, everybody pretty much accepted that this resolution was not going to be a successful one because there was one nation, France, that had indicated that it would veto it under any set of circumstances or any similar resolution is modified that would leave a path open to conflict. But we always knew from the very beginning that such a path had to be kept open. And this is what serious consequences meant. And without that path, Saddam Hussein would never comply. And what he was trying to do was just stretch it out. More inspections, more time, let's delay, let's give a little here, give a little there. Let's see if we can break this consensus. And with the certainty of a French veto and possibly other vetoes, this was not the time to have further division within the Council by taking this to a vote. I've got one. Let me, excuse me. Yeah.
Mr. Secretary, you seemed to imply yesterday on one of the shows that you believe French commercial interests would help drive the position. I'm wondering if you can elaborate on that, and how firm a guarantee do we have that Turkey won't send its troops well into northern Iraq and cause problems with the Kurds there? I made the point that there, in response to the question, that of course there are commercial interests that everybody has to consider, and the French have for years had difficulties with the inspection regime, and I pointed out in one of the shows yesterday that when you go back to 1998 and early 1999, when the current inspection regime was being developed, when UNMOVIC was being created after the collapse of the previous inspection regime, France worked actively for a number of months, in our judgment, to try to weaken that inspection regime. And at the end of the day, when compromises had been made and everybody thought we had a good outcome before our time, the previous administration, even then France abstained from voting for it. And so that is of concern to us, but in